Juror number 2 is the latest film from Clint Eastwood. Yes, that Clint Eastwood. And yes, he is still making films, and yes, he is still quite old, and I imagine he will be making films until the day he dies, and I wouldn't be surprised if his last film is released posthumously. I might not be pronouncing that word correctly. Anyway, is Juror number 2 good? I would have to say yes. It reminds me of a lot of really decent films that Clint Eastwood has made in his career. I mean, he made like $1 Million Baby, Gran Torino, and let's see, I think Clint Eastwood has done, he probably hasn't done more as a director than he has an actor. Traditionally, a lot of his films that he has directed star himself. Juror number 2 does not have him in it, and I think it's kind of benefits that, because honestly, I can't really think of a place where he would be in this thing, except there are a lot of great stars in this film. Nicholas Hoult, who has been in a lot of things. It's hard to believe this actor, I think, is most notably known for playing a young version of the Beast in those X-Men films. But he's kind of grown as an actor. If you've seen Warm Bodies, I actually thought that was a very, very cool film. But Juror number 2 is a more grounded film, trying to be a bit more realistic. And the basic premise is that Nicholas Hoult's character is called in for jury duty. Now, as it is, his wife is about to give birth, and apparently they've had problems giving birth. I think maybe she had a miscarriage or something like that, but essentially he wanted to be there for the experience. So he's trying to get out of his jury duty as much as he can. But then something kind of strange happens, and this is where I'm going to get into some spoiler territory, because yeah, this is actually what drew me into the film. Basically, Nicholas Hoult's character he's presiding as a jury over a case where it's essentially, second-degree murder, I think it is. But essentially, it's a murder case. And the guy who's the defendant is accused of killing his girlfriend. And apparently, what happened is, and they go through the motions of the trial, they basically have the witnesses come up, and apparently the defendant and his girlfriend had a kind of a tussle at a bar. Maybe not a tussle, but they had a very loud verbal argument at a bar. And then later on, it's discovered that her body is badly beaten and lying on the side of the road later. And so basically, they put 2 and 2 together, and it's like, well, this guy obviously beat his girlfriend to death and left her on the side of the road to die. Well, here's the thing. Main character, that is Nicholas Hoult's character, also puts 2 to 2 together and remembers that, hey wait, I was at the bar that night and I remember these 2 having this argument. And then, since this guy, Nicholas Hoult's character, is kind of an alcoholic, he almost has a drink but decides not to. But as he's about to go home, he hits something along the way, and he thinks it's like a deer or something, and there's a severe dent in his fender, and then but then he realizes, wait a second, if that was the same night that I hit something and it turned out this gal was dead, maybe you can see exactly where this is going. Yes, Nicholas Hoult's character hit this person's girlfriend, and now the guy who's about to be tried for this and is probably going to be found guilty of this crime is actually innocent, and he has the information that can keep this, he has information that will essentially clear the guy, but unfortunately will inculcate himself. I think I'm using that word correctly. He will essentially make himself the most guilty of this thing, for sure. So, how does this go? I actually remember describing the plot of this to a friend of mine, and my friend basically said, this reminds me of that Simpsons episode. And there actually was a Simpsons episode that was actually like this, where Bart witnessed a crime, but he couldn't come forward with the evidence that he had witnessed this crime because he was skipping school that day. And if he did that, Principal Skinner would get him. And I have to admit, there is a similarity to this. And I have to admit, Juror number 2 feels like a plotline that would have been done, say, I don't know, in the 30s or something like that. And I'm just going to say it. It feels like a film maybe Alfred Hitchcock would do. Because there's this element of crime and there's this element of guilt. And there's a lot of things like that Alfred Hitchcock was very good at doing. So if Clint Eastwood is trying to imitate Hitchcock in this, congratulations. He's a better imitator of Hitchcock than M. Night Shyamalan. Oh, I went there. Anyway, so you're probably wondering what in the world they can do with this plot line. Well, I have to tell you that it becomes like the movie 12 Angry Men, essentially, or another film I think was kind of similar to this, The Runaway Jury, where essentially you have a juror member in there who's trying to steer the jury toward a certain sentence. And whether it's successful or not is really interesting. Speaking of interesting, I find it interesting that J.K. Simmons is in this film, but barely in the film. Now, normally when you get J.K. Simmons in your thing, suddenly it becomes classy. Even the movie Red One was somewhat classy when you had J.K. Simmons in there. And you can hear my 10-minute rant on that one. J.K. Simmons, man, he always improves everything. I don't know what it is. He's like a spice that you put in your dish and immediately everybody will give you 5 stars. But here he's barely in it. He actually kind of figures out that, hey, there could have been... because apparently J.K. Simmons' character was an ex-cop or something like that. So when he comes in the jury, he brings his A game. He says, like, you know what? This is a case that I don't think they figured out. Now, here's the big thing I will have to hold against this movie. You would think that if they found this girl on the side of the road and she appeared to be beaten, you think some forensic report would have figured out she wasn't beaten, she was hit by a car. To me, I feel like they would have probably figured that out. I don't really know why that wasn't really brought up. Because that feels like, to me, that would have been like, yeah, they probably would have. I mean, there's ways you can analyze wounds from a car versus a bludgeoning. And I guess because the main character hit her with a car and she fell off a bridge or something like that, I think they thought that it was like the impact of her falling off the bridge caused all the wounds to happen to her. I guess. I'm willing to sort of pardon that because I think there is a sort of aspect of that going on. Now, here's where the film gets really interesting, because this is where I'm going to get into a little bit of spoiler territory, but not more than the 9-minute mark. That tends to be my thing here. So essentially this character kind of goes through the motions of trying to get this whole thing going his way so he can not be put in jail for obviously being the one who killed this girl, even though it was unintentional and accidental. But he's still covering his tracks. And there's kind of a really, I don't know, I kind of like stories like this that put the justice system in a way that it's like, yeah, he wasn't really at fault there, but you know that the court is going to come down on him. And Kiefer Sutherland is also in this film, is also very underutilized, but he basically plays the main character's best friend who keeps telling him, like, don't tell him this information because they will utterly come down on you. And yeah. Now, Toni Collette is also in this film, and I think she's a character that's very well utilized because I think she's trying to run for DA and she's trying to get this case prosecuted and she's trying to get the guy, well, guilty. At the end of this film, and this is where I'm going to get into spoiler territory, because this film has what I believe is the perfect ending, where essentially she figures out that it was in fact Nicholas Hoult that is responsible for this crime. But by the time she figures that out, the guy that they have in custody has already been charged guilty. But at the end of the film, she shows up on Nicholas Hoult's door and just looks at him. And that look is great. And I just love that idea. And I kind of feel like there's sort of a justice kind of shines through sort of ending on this. It's kind of a nice ending. Anyway, see Juror number 2 if you have.